First-person shooters, high-speed violent, demon-slaying action to some, methodical, tactical, military shooters to others. It is home to many diverse stories and settings, to many distinct adventures. You've experienced the genre in your own way, but want to learn more about its history. Well, to learn about its history, you have to go back to the beginning. While some casual gamers might think Doom was their first FPS, some might know about Wolfenstein 3D coming out a year prior, and the well-researched would have discovered the Catacombs series made by id Software before they even released Wolfenstein. But the widely considered first 3D first-person video game ever made
Congratulations!
is Maze.
Oh my god.
What is that?
Created in 1973 as a student project by Steve Cully, Greg Thompson, and Howard Palmer for the IMLAC PDS-1 minicomputer while they were at NASA for a work-study program. Initially, there wasn't anything to do other than walk through the maze. Literally, just walking.
Forever.
One eternity later.
Yes, it's time to stop. No, this is not okay. It's time to stop. It's time to stop.
This version would later be expanded upon by Thompson when he began studying at MIT, bringing the game to the school's computer science laboratory and working on it with Dave Lebling in February of 1974. Together, using the PDP-10 minicomputer and PDS-1 terminals found at the school, they would allow up to 8 players to connect between computers by a central server to go against each other, having to navigate a disembodied eye through the maze, fighting off various enemies, and shooting other players. They would also add scoring, add a top-down map view, and a level editor. There would be several versions created after this, but the only other one I'll be covering here is probably the most important one, being the Xerox version. Titled Maze War, it was created by Jim Guyton, Mike Warman, and other colleagues of theirs for the Xerox Alto computer in 1977. They changed the networking code so that it could handle multiple systems talking directly to each other without a central server. So it was popular within the office, and in a matter of weeks, spread to other Xerox locations. Eventually, it migrated to MIT, Stanford, and Carnegie Mellon University. The game was maintained by Guyton for 6 more months before leaving Xerox for RAND. In the early 80s, Xerox would release a modified version of the Alto computer named Xerox Star, and the source code to Maze War soon after it. This is the version that would go on to inspire other takes on the first-person maze game concept throughout the 1980s and 90s, and is the earliest example of what would later be termed as the first-person shooter genre. Alongside 1974's Spacem, they are considered the joint ancestors of the genre. Maze War was never commercially released, but from what I was able to find, the first successfully marketed FPS game was Atari's Battlezone. Released in November 1980, it was an upright, full-size arcade cabinet featuring a periscope viewfinder. Since the game required the player to put their face into viewing goggles, it is sometimes considered the first virtual reality arcade video game. In this, players would be limited to playing the game through the viewfinder and navigate using a radar on the top of the screen, locating enemy tank units to shoot them with missiles while avoiding incoming projectiles and obstacles that may also be used as shields since they were indestructible. Every once in a while, UFOs would appear on screen that were non-aggressive, allowing the player to shoot them down for bonus points. Battlezone was well received, and even though it wasn't as successful as Asteroids, it produced approximately 15,000 sales for Atari. In 1982, it would go on to earn an honorable mention for the best commercial arcade game at the 3rd annual Archie Awards, as a runner-up behind the Ghost Eater himself, Pac-Man. In 1991, alongside publisher Softdisk, the most important video game developer to the first-person shooter genre, id Software would release their first FPS, Hovertank 3D. Taking the template from Battlezone to create their own tank-based game, while similar to its inspiration, it differed in the fact that not only must the player fight off enemies, they also had to navigate a maze and save civilians along the way. Once all of them were rescued, a yellow teleporter would appear somewhere on the map. Players must find it to beat the level, and rewards were given based on how many living people were saved and how fast the level was completed. All damage to the Hovertank was also repaired. Hovertank was a landmark 3D game. Other titles like Flight Simulator and Alpha Waves featured better looking and detailed environments, but ran noticeably slower. John Carmack, the genius behind the game's engine, with help from John Romero, would program and develop it in just 6 weeks, 2 weeks more than any other engine used in id Software's previous games. Just 7 months later, after Hovertank 3D was released, id Software would drop their follow-up game in November 1991, Catacombs 3D. Released for MS-DOS, it is a dark fantasy first-person shooter that puts the players in the shoes of the High Wizard Pedon Everhail, tasking them to fight monsters, cast spells, all while navigating the catacombs of the town cemetery in order to defeat the evil Lynch nemesis and rescue his friend Grelminar. This would be the first FPS game to contain a playable human main character, setting the trend for distinct heroes in first-person shooters throughout the 90s, like Doom Guy from Doom, Duke Nukem from his self-titled game, and Gordon Freeman from Half-Life. The game engine would be a modified version of the one used in Hovertank. Carmack would integrate texture mapping into the engine after seeing a demo of Ultima Underworld at the Consumer Electronics Show in 1990, stated to say that he could write a faster texture mapper. This influence is conflicted. However, in the book Masters of Doom, author David Kushner states that the concept was briefly discussed by Underworld developer Paul Neurath and John Romero in a 1991 phone call. Before Hovertank 3D, id Software was mainly known for creating 2D side-scrolling games like the Commander Keen series. Around the same time Catacombs 3D released, the second Commander Keen trilogy was nearing its completion and their contract with Softdisk was almost done. The founders of id, Tom Hall, John Romero, John Carmack, and Adrian Carmack would sit down to discuss their next major title. Hall, director and designer at id, wanted to work on a third trilogy for the King series, but after recognizing that Carmack was putting all his efforts into 3D action games instead of 2D side-scrolling platformers, proposed a sci-fi project. Later, Romero would suggest a 3D remake of the 1981 Castle Wolfenstein instead. John Carmack, Hall, and Romero all had fond memories of the original, so the team was very interested in that idea. Adrian Carmack wanted to move away from the child-friendly art style of previous titles and work on something more violent. All agreed that a maze-like shooter would work well with the current 3D engine. And so, work began for what would become one of their most defining releases. But that, my dear viewer, is a story for another day. Thank you guys for watching. I hope you enjoyed that brief history of the precursors to the FPS genre in the 70s, 80s, and early 90s. There are a bunch of other details I left out. I got most of my information from the wikis for those titles and other sources, so I'll link those down below, as well as this amazing book titled I'm Too Young to Die from Bitmap Books. I'm not sponsored by them, but they are a great website that offer a fantastic catalog of books ranging from art books, video game system compendiums, and of course video game history books, all meticulously researched and gorgeously designed. So if you are at all interested, you should go check them out. But anyways, like always, leave a like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell, and get ready for the beginning of the individual reviews. See you in the maze.